トビデオ
The following is a Sci-Fi Channel special presentation.
Regarding the early Western anime fandom of the 90s, there are three anime that are understood as the most defining anime of that decade. A holy trinity, if you will. First, you have Akira, the big kahuna, the atom from which all modern anime fandom in the West descended from. It is a film that not only exponentially increased the knowledge and appreciation of anime outside of Japan, but also became one of the most influential sci-fi films of the 21st century. Its influence on pop culture is so vast that it may warrant its own video one day, but just so you know, that list includes the diverse titles of Star Wars, Half-Life, Serial Experiments Lain, and Kanye West before he went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Then you have Ghost in the Shell. A film that was directly inspired by Akira through its setting and atmosphere, it also became Akira's equal in its effect on both Japanese and American pop culture. Many famous directors from the Wachowskis to Cameron to Spielberg have drawn influence from Ghost in the Shell for both its futurist setting as well as its deep themes of identity, humanity, and the next step of human evolution. And finally, there's Ninja Scroll.
Looks like a storm is brewing here.
I better get moving.
(1993's Ninja Scroll tells the story of Jubei Kibagami, a wandering mercenary and former ninja who finds himself wrapped up in a conflict with the Eight Devils of Kimon, a group of supernaturally powerful ninjas who are plotting to overthrow the Tokugawa shogunate. At first, Jubei wants nothing to do with the plot, but a combination of killing one of the devils and being poisoned by a Tokugawa spy who's blackmailing him with the antidote ultimately convinces him to answer the call. Accompanying him on this adventure is the aforementioned spy Dakwon, an elderly yet cunning veteran of the ninja craft, as well as Kagero, a rookie kunoichi whose body is poisonous to touch thanks to her time as a food tester, her goal being to avenge her ninja clan who were slaughtered by the devils. And from there, ninja battle after ninja battle ensues as alliances shift, conspiracies are unveiled, and a ghost from Jubei's past soon begins to take center stage. These three anime films are considered by many to be the true standouts of quality in the early years of anime fandom, especially when stacked up to the various grimdark piddle and crap that distribution companies were bringing over in a show of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. The three were so synonymous with that decade that Manga Entertainment actually put out a box set called Manga Essentials, which contained all three of the films in question in one glorious set. But regarding the three films today, you can see that there is a bit of disparity between which of them still burn brightly in popular consciousness and which do not. Akira and Ghost in the Shell are still highly regarded not just as landmark anime films, but as landmark films in general. Ninja Scroll, on the other hand,
By the way, Jubei, did you make love to the ninja girl?
Okay, I know it sounds like I'm downplaying Ninja Scroll's impact on popular culture, and that's only because I am. And it's wrong for me to do that. Ninja Scroll was Manga Entertainment's best-selling title in the mid-90s, selling over 70,000 copies. It currently has a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. It spawned its own television series on its 10th anniversary. The film's direction and visual style strongly influenced the Wachowskis in the making of the Matrix trilogy, ultimately being the reason why director Yoshiaki Kawajiri ended up being brought aboard to direct two shorts for the Animatrix. And most importantly, Ninja Scroll, like his brethren, had plans for a live-action remake announced in the late 2000s. As far as we know, it's still trapped in development hell, and hopefully it stays that way, because God forbid we see Scarlett Johansson prancing about in Edo, Japan. But all of these points serve to better underline the question: why is Ninja Scroll, for all its accomplishments in both critical and commercial success, still seen as the more niche film when compared to Akira and Ghost in the Shell? Today, Akira and Ghost in the Shell are given a glow of reverence by the pop culture machine. They are cultural touchstones. The most enduring aspect of Ninja Scroll, on the other hand, are the ever-present apocryphal stories from the 90s of inattentive parents renting the films for their 10-year-old slumber parties, thinking it would be completely safe because of their prejudices towards the medium of animation, ultimately leading to their child being exposed to this in the first 10 minutes. followed by this scene, which I'm not going to show you, but I will play the sounds.
Shut up. And perhaps I'll let you live just a little bit longer. Don't let it cross your mind that I wouldn't mind raping a dead girl.
Charming, isn't it? Certainly does feel like I answered my own question by bringing that up. The reason why Ninja Scroll doesn't get the acclaim of the other two is because it's schlock. It's exploitative, misogynistic trash. A thin piece of ultraviolet pulp that is sold purely on its bloody visuals. The only thing separating it and the likes of Mad Bull 34 is its blockbuster budget. This attitude was true even back when it was the new hotness. To some, it was just one in another long line of gaudy, ultraviolet crap, only separated by its huge budget. Writer and Anime World Order host Daryl Surratt had this to say in a 2016 retrospective. When I was 15 and the stereotype of anime was that it was all animated smut laden with bombastic graphic violence, I absolutely hated this movie with the level of scorn the internet currently visits upon the creative efforts of Michael Bay, Brett Ratner, McG, Rob Liefeld, and other approved punching bags. In a world where anime fans were few, I needed to represent. I'd tell everyone I was into art, not this tawdry sensationalism. I'd say the depiction of women was more exploitative than the bloodshed, and lament that titles like this would get released but not the works of the then obscure Studio Ghibli. And I would say to the people who are still holding that mindset that you are justified in thinking that. To ignore the problems of Ninja Scroll is willfully ignorant at best, and intellectually dishonest at worst. But to completely write off this film as somehow being unworthy to be among the likes of Akira and Ghost in the Shell, that ain't it, Chief. Believe it or not, there was a reason why Ninja Scroll got the cred to be considered a classic in the first place. Alongside the bad, and trust me, we will be talking about the bad, there is also a lot of good in it. I personally like Ninja Scroll, and I think it's still an important work in anime. So I will be pointing out what makes Ninja Scroll good, while still looking at it from a critical perspective. You can still like something while criticizing it, despite what the internet has told you. So I think the best place to start is, what exactly is a ninja? A ninja, or shinobi, was a covert agent in feudal Japan. The main job of the ninja was to do the dirty work of the shogun that hired them, work that was considered underhanded and dishonorable by the more honor-bound samurai class. These included, but are not limited to, espionage, infiltration, sabotage, and assassinations. Surprisingly enough, actual historical records of ninja are quite scant. We do know they existed, that they were most active around the Sengoku period, and that there were ninja clans in the Iga and Koga provinces. But the specific details of who the ninja were and how they operated are, for the most part, lost to the sands of time. Historians have said this is either because A. Ninjas were perceived as a lower class than samurai, therefore historians had no interest in recording their deeds, or B. Ninjas operated in secret, therefore it would be against their best interest to have written records of their exploits. Most of what we know of ninjas nowadays come from folklore. Not only were the ninjas experts at guerrilla warfare, but also psychological warfare. They made sure to spread rumors and exaggerated stories of their exploits to make it look like they were supernatural occurrences. By the Edo period, the ninja had become a stock folk hero, a mysterious figure who could do the impossible such as master the 4 elements, turn invisible, or summon giant toads for them to ride on. These tales of fantastical feats continued from the Edo period onward, influencing popular culture both at home and abroad. It's no surprise that Ninja Scroll draws a lot from the ninja legends of old, particularly considering the plot revolving around ninjas with superpowers. The 8 Devils themselves draw from a very specific source of inspiration, the works of author Futaro Yamada, specifically Yamada's most well-known work, the Koga Ninja Scrolls. It is also a work that centers around a group of ninjas battling it out with supernatural inhuman abilities. But while the ninjas in that book derive their powers from decades of selective inbreeding, the anime just chooses to hand-wave an explanation by implying that the superpowers are a result of various intense training regimens. Yes folks, you too can manifest snakes from your body, control minds, and become functionally immortal. All you have to do is go on keto and do plenty of push-ups and sit-ups. But the most interesting influence I found was that Jubei was based on a real person, or at the very least an interpretation of a real person, namely Yagyo Jubei Mitsuyoshi. A very famous and romanticized samurai who was thought to have ninja connections. There are very few specifics about who Mitsuyoshi actually was. This leaves him open to a lot of interpretations, and that's no different here. The thing that stands out for Jubei is that he is one of the rare interpretations of Mitsuyoshi who has both of his eyes. Most Mitsuyoshi analogs opt to give him an eye patch as a form of shorthand to signify who the character is based on. So far, it just sounds like what Ninja Scroll has done is to have just stood on the foundation that other storytellers have built up and take the next step. What does Ninja Scroll actually do to help it stand out? It goes without saying that this film looks amazing. Second only to Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, this is Kawajiri's best looking film. Kawajiri is a very visual director. He believes that the best way to get a person engrossed in the story is to start off the film with a memorable visual that grabs you by the face and pulls you in. No film shows off this philosophy to filmmaking better than Ninja Scroll. Its opening scene has almost become its signature. We see our hero Jubei coming out of the mist, his eyes hidden by a straw hat. In one hand he carries his sword, in the other he's casually eating a rice ball, all while a heroic wind blows around him. Even before he casually foils an ambush by 3 other ninjas, this image of Jubei that we see in the first 30 seconds of the film sticks with you throughout. It is the first step to establishing Jubei's character as this badass hero. His first appearance raises the question of, this character looks badass. Is he a badass? And the subsequent fight 30 seconds later where he non-lethally takes out a group of wannabe thieves without even dropping his rice ball answers with a resounding yes. The visual style extends to the scenery. At this point in his career, Kawajiri had mostly done stories that took place in an urban environment. Since this was his first project that was set in the past rather than the present or the future, Kawajiri really wanted to capture the beauty of Japan's natural landscape. He and animation director Yutaka Minawa drew inspiration from the Sumi-e style painting on how they portrayed the landscapes. Lots of elegant black brushstrokes and lines against backdrops of a singular color, giving the impression that our characters are part of a lush painting. This style also ties into Kawajiri's knack for how he uses color in his scenes. There are many scenes in this film where one color will utterly dominate it, from intense reds, to burning oranges, to pale yellows, to cold blues. Color is the key for both enhancing the lighting of the landscapes as well as strengthening the tension of a scene. For example, verdant greens are used extensively in one of the best scenes of the film, where Jubei has to duel a blind samurai in the middle of a bamboo forest. The greens are there to emphasize just how thick the glade is, and how all the more impressive it is that both fighters can effortlessly weave between the stalks in their deadly ballet. He also knows how to play with the absence of color, such as in a flashback that takes place during winter. Here the only colors are black, grays, and whites to emphasize the past. That way, when color does appear, such as red when blood is spilled, it makes what's happening on screen look all the more important to remember. But it's not just the visuals that stand out for Ninja Scroll, there's also the story. One of the biggest praises I have to give Ninja Scroll is for having such a tight script. Everything that is introduced to the story will ultimately pay off at some point. The plot is very straightforward and does not get distracted by any potential cul-de-sacs. But the most important thing the script does right is that it establishes true stakes in the story. Sure, Jubei could be an uninvolved bystander who just happens to be the right man in the wrong place, but it actually establishes fairly early that the main villain of the film, Himuro Genma, is a man Jubei has a huge connection with. Genma was the leader of Jubei's ninja clan who had ordered the other members to kill each other just so he could keep the location to a secret stash of gold for himself. Jubei was forced to kill his comrades to survive, and later aired his grievances towards Genma in the most direct way possible. But now that he knows that Genma is still alive after 5 years despite having a slight case of decapitation, this gives Jubei a personal stake in the story. Dakwon's blackmail subplot sure does get Jubei involved in the story, but now we have something that attaches Jubei to the main plot, giving him a valid reason for wanting to explore the plot further even after he's no longer being blackmailed. It's a good thing that this script is so tightly constructed because the plot itself is quite simple. Plot stuff happens, one of the devils appears, fight until said devil is dead, more plot stuff happens, keep repeating this measure until the end. The whole story is centered around what I've heard called video game pacing. The plot is not just a series of events one after another, but our characters going from one location to another, finding a boss, defeating that boss, and moving on to the next level. They do a good job implementing this out because most of how the devil's powers works are only hinted at, and we don't really get to see them fully in action until the next boss fight. I mean, set pieces with them.
Look out!
It keeps you, the audience, in anticipation, making you wonder what the fight between the next devil and Jubei is going to be like, and how Jubei is going to win. And the best part is that while Jubei may be an established badass, it still makes it very clear that he is completely outclassed when paired up against the devils. After all, he has no superpowers and is just a really good swordsman. Ultimately, nearly all the victories with the devils come down to a combination of outsmarting them, plus a dash of good old-fashioned dumb luck. So, Ninja Scroll handles this story quite well, making for a very exciting ninja story that keeps you on the edge of your seat at all times. And it certainly has no problems whatsoever. You didn't think I was gonna forget Ninja Scroll's biggest problem, weren't you? Strap in, guys and gals. It's time to talk about how Ninja Scroll portrays women. Ninja Scroll is burdened by one hefty albatross around its metaphorical neck, and that's how it treats its women characters. That graphic sexual assault scene that I opted not to show you at the beginning, that is another signature scene from Ninja Scroll, and boy is that not a good thing. Kawachiri is good at a lot of things, but his track record has shown us that writing women isn't one of them. There are only 3 named women in this anime, well, 4 if you count the diseased woman at the beginning who dies instantly, and 2 of them are bad guys. The rest are either various townfolk extra, both living and deceased, and courtesans. Benisato and Zakuro of the 8 Devils are just different takes on the same trope. Scantily clad kunoichi with pale white skin and villainous smirks adorning their ruby red lips. Benisato, being the most ridiculous of the 2, has to be fully naked in order for her powers to be used at their fullest potential. Oh, and she also does this.
Her sting is most deadly.
As for Zakuro, she's better, but not that much. On one hand, her powers don't rely on seduction considering they are based on gunpowder and explosives, but she isn't given that much character aside from jealous bitch, and the most noteworthy thing she does is kill fellow devil and Gemma's boy toy Yurimaru, all just because he didn't want to jump her bones and talk shit to her one too many times.
Go away. You're a failure. Don't hang around me anymore. You disgust me.
Oh yeah, we got a gay misogynist character in here as well. You know, just in case you thought women were the only minority getting the short end of the stick here. But we could justify this by saying they're the villainous henchmen of the piece, and some leeway can be granted in how one-dimensionally they can be in their smug evilness. The real victim in all of this is Kagero. Dear sweet Kagero. That sexual assault scene, she's on the receiving end of that. And you know what the best part is? That's not even the only one she gets. Just check out how she gets brainwashed. This calls for a good old-fashioned yeesh. These are considered the points where it shows Kagero as nothing more than a defenseless victim. She is the anime's whipping girl who has to have trauma beaten into her for most of the anime so we, the audience, can feel sorry for her. People have contextualized this abuse by saying that she's the food taster who has little experience working in the field, so naturally she would have a hard time against more veteran ninjas. But the thing is, Kagero is not a defenseless victim. Throughout the anime, she is shown to be quite capable in her own abilities despite her greenness. She helps out Jubei in their battle against the 8 Devils in more ways than one, and in some cases becomes the deciding factor of the outcomes of the fight. She certainly does a lot more than Dakuin, who either goes off on his own or plays spectator for most of the film. And so this doesn't really justify her treatment in the anime. In fact, it kind of makes it worse. The sexual assault scenes, while admittedly not shot in a fetishistic manner and being treated as a vile evil, still come off as needlessly excessive and are only there because Kagero is a woman, and they need something bad that happens to a woman. But we're only scratching the surface regarding Kagero's treatment by the story. So here we go. So you know that poisonous blackmail Dakuin gave Jubei at the beginning of the film? How he won't give Jubei the antidote until he will complete the job? And how a big part of Kagero's character is that she's filled with poisons to the point that anyone who sleeps with her will die? Guess what the antidote is?
The old man told me how to do it. Counteract the poison. Kill poison with poison, he said. He said, if you make love to me, you'll be free from poison. Mine will destroy it.
Deus Ex Machina! Alright. To be fair, Jubei doesn't take the antidote. I mean, who needs that when you got your respecting woman juice? So Kagero isn't forced to bang Jubei to save his life, and we're getting to the climax of the film. Jubei and Dakuin are lying in wait to ambush Genma, and Kagero has successfully called in her reinforcements from her master. Everything appears to be going hunky-dory until, uh-oh!
Jubei!
You idiots. Sakaki Hyobu died 2 days ago.
So Kagero is fatally wounded, and we get a scene with her and Jubei saying their goodbyes to each other. Kagero is thankful for Jubei because he's the only one who's ever treated her like a human being, and not just an expendable tool like other ninjas. With that, she gives him her first and last kiss that cures him of his poison before passing away happily. Admittedly, it's an emotional and touching scene that shows Jubei at the most vulnerable we see him in this film. And it's perfectly capped off with Jubei giving Kagero a proper send-off while keeping her headband as a tragic keepsake. However, this is yet another in a long line of a woman character being killed off as a means to serve a male character's development. And it also feels completely unnecessary because it seems like the reason she got killed off was to give Jubei more personal motivation to kill Genma. Which he already had because Genma forced Jubei to kill his ninja clan, so this is just adding more motivation on top of motivation that was already there, and I guess we just needed a big tear-jerking scene before the big battle. So out the door you go, Kagero. And with Kagero's death, along with the death of the other female devils, no named female characters are left alive by the end of the story. There's a place for women in Kawajiri's works, and it's called a fridge. So in the end, Ninja Scroll is a simple story that's focused less on themes and character growth and more on visual spectacle and fight scenes, all while treating its female cast in a very questionable way to say the least, using them until their time in the story is done, in which case they are unceremoniously cast out like a fresh rib bone at a barbecue joint. It makes sense that its shelf life feels a lot more limited when compared to that of its peers. It only got as big as it did in the West because it was showing a level of brutal violence and sexuality with a huge lavish budget not seen in the animated medium since, well, ever. It's all the spectacle of Akira and Ghost in the Shell, with none of the narrative depth that keeps both of those anime in the cultural zeitgeist. And yet, I still really like this film. Don't get me wrong, when it does bad, it does very, very bad. But when it does good, it's amazing. It may be mostly spectacle, but that spectacle is some of the most well done in the history of the medium. There's never a boring moment in Ninja Scroll. For second one, it digs its hooks into you, giving you a thrilling and ultimately satisfying ninja story. And sometimes, that's all you need. If you have the stomach for some of its more dicier bits, then I would say Ninja Scroll is a piece of anime history that is still worth checking out. As I said before, there was a reason it was considered a classic of its time in the first place.